Welcome to another episode of Arbitration Life. I am Hana Doumal.
And I am Janette Brin.
The increasingly globalized world requires neutral but effective dispute resolution mechanism, hence international arbitration centers. There are numerous arbitration centers around the world administering hundreds, if not thousands of cases. If you are new to arbitration or you are already an arbitration practitioner, but you never worked in or with an institution such as ours, today's show will hopefully give you a bit more insight.
We can certainly brag about the BVI International Arbitration Center all day, but we happen to have great relationships with colleagues around the world who can also share a thing or two about working in an arbitration center or in the field of arbitration.
And today's guest has served as the executive director of the New York International Arbitration Center since 2017. In her role at NYIAC, she collaborates with stakeholders and thought leaders in the space to advance scholarship and best practices, offering educational programming events and trainings. She is actively engaged with the arbitration community at the regional, national, and global level, boasting several professional memberships, including being the board member of ArbitralWomen and the co-chair of the Racial Quality for Arbitration Lawyers. She's also an adjunct professor at Seton Hall Law School, and she's a peer review board member of the American Review of International Arbitration at Columbia Law School. Please welcome Rekha Rangachari. Welcome to Arbitration Life, Rekha. How are you? It's so good to see you.
Hi, ladies. It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
How is spring in New York at the moment?
It is blooming, thankfully, and I think we all need it. It's always a good feeling when you get to go to your closet and go to the warmer clothes section.
Yeah. Now, as executive director of the New York International Arbitration Center, how would you define your goal for the institution?
Okay, well, my goal in the first instance is to platform New York as a seat, the application of New York law, which is beneficial for commercial parties, amongst other things, and as well as a venue. And to take the latter point, to be the best in class as a venue. At NYIAC, I'd like to believe you get the best service. We cater to the needs of the stakeholders, and it's a really directive process. And then you get the best independent option, right, in the New York market, where many know your name. And that familiarity really is special for a service organization. To be a venue, though, includes both hosting hearings and also hosting thought leadership events, because the goal there is to create the community and demonstrate how that community thrives. Colleagues and friends in pre-pandemic times would walk through the door for a coffee, for scholarship, to celebrate publication launches and new books, and to share in collaboration of institutions, organizations, and the like. And that community is exactly what exemplifies NYIAC. And to create that community, to evolve that community, that's really a very important goal of mine.
Well, that's wonderful. And to follow up on that, what is the most exciting thing about your position as executive director at NYIAC?
You know, that's an easy question for me. It's the people. To just take a step back and go through who are these people, right? It's anyone and everyone that has an interest in international arbitration and its nexus to New York. We have 40 founding firms that financially support NYIAC. To that, we have an esteemed global advisory board. And most recently, we added an advisory council. The advisory council is really interesting. It is comprised of economic consultants and third-party funders and expands how we talk about the law, right? We become more inclusive. And so it gets down to the people at the end of the day. that people walk through the door when they're in session at the UNCITRAL's Working Group 2 and Working Group 3 as an example. And they come in for spirited discussion to make new connections. Often also LLMs who are studying in any one of our prominent New York schools, they come to the door and make their first connections at NYIAC. And then after they go off and start their illustrious careers, they write me to tell me about these contact points that they've made. How phenomenal, right? That NYIAC is this open door place, inclusive, where you can come regardless of what kind of stakeholder. And hopefully you raise a glass with us, you make some connections, you learn something, and you have a good time at the end of the day doing it. That to me is success.
It definitely is.
Yeah. So New York was heavily impacted by the pandemic. How are things now compared to last year? And are hearings returning to in-person, or what's the situation right now?
Yeah, so New York was certainly heavily hit, and we're still in the process of reacting, of responding, of mustering resilience. But here I'll just reinforce, NYIAC and New York will always thrive. This notion of New York strong that emanated out of 9/11 and even past realities. So we're coming back, we're opening up, we're blooming as spring is in session. And there's been a lot of asks about hybrid hearings and in-person hearings. They haven't yet happened by and large because people are thoughtful, practitioners are thoughtful about gathering, tribunals are thoughtful about that. You certainly don't want to have a super spreader event. But it seems that on the horizon, we will go back to at least hybrid hearings, if not fully in-person hearings, for that connection point, and to be able to have direct and cross testimony and engage in a way that is difficult to do in remote, although it's happening certainly in real time.
Thank you. I love that you reference 9/11 and the whole sense of energy that New Yorkers tend to have when, real life events happen.
Yeah,
so thank you for that.
Yeah, I think it underlies exactly who we are. The New York, NYIAC was created out of it's so-called the I Love New York Club. It was the International Arbitration Club of New York and the New York State Bar Association and other groups. And they got together, and the product, is New York. And what is New York? It's the energy that permeates the streets when you come. It's why people want to come. It's the clients. It's why the practitioners, have their headquarters here or operate out of the New York office. And so, sometimes I joke, although a lawyer, I'm a brand manager for New York and all of the aspects that affect us as lawyers, but it's a great product. It's always good to start with the product you believe in. The rest, it comes out of that. So, and I really believe, across the world, we've been hit really hard in pandemic, and my prayers and my thoughts go out to the community at large. But here, that motto, it really rings true. New York strong. That's how people have reacted. They've helped one another. We've gotten through great hardship together, stronger together as a community cry, but it's true. And I take great solace in that. So thank you so much for noting that.
And now talking about the management of logistics, it can certainly be critical for any arbitral institution, whether in person or remote. And as our number goal is always to ensure hearings run smoothly for clients. So what advice would you offer to clients when preparing for a hearing?
Make a checklist and check it twice. That sounds so ridiculous, right? But it's true. There's a penumbra of issues, aspects that you need on site for the hearing that goes from something as specific as, how are we dealing with the e-bundles and the hot seat and where are they placed, and what are the vantage points as the different practitioners give their, opening and closing statements to their various presentations. You need to scope out the room. You need to figure out all of that. You also need to know how logistically, where are your teams? How are they going to be operating? So those details that readily percolate, but then the others, right? where is my team going to have dinner, especially if I'm an, out of New York practitioner, or I have clients that are out of New York. Where am I going to show them things of New York in those small moments where we can get a good bite to eat, a nice bottle of wine, talk about the case, and then go back and do it all over again, right? And so I think it's all of that. And that's why, in NYIAC, we try to be ready for that, right? We try to be ready with that afternoon sugar high when people are coming out and they need the chocolate to be able to go back in and have a really effective closing session before they break for the day, as well as with restaurant lists handy. And all of that sounds like minutia, right? But at the end of the day, to me, that's part of the service. That's in addition to let's test first, second, thrice, the technology. And even then, there may be a connection issue because it's technology, but we will figure it out, to every other aspect. So we have a really good checklist that we offer clients, but they often come in with their own, which I prefer, bespoke creation of checklists. It's the best way for any type A manager.
Definitely. That works every time.
So you are also an ArbitralWomen board member. Could you please tell us more about ArbitralWomen and all the work that you are able to do there?
ArbitralWomen is really a phenomenal entity, and I feel lucky to be part of its leadership. And I really need to tip my hat to Merez Philippe and Louise Barrington, the co-founders, as well as Dana McGrath, who is its president right now, because they've created a really phenomenal community. It's a word I think it's echoed throughout our conversation today, but that's why we join affinity groups and other organizations. And so with ArbitralWomen, one aspect that I love so much is we celebrate other women. We spotlight the events that women write in that they're speaking at, because sometimes it's really tough to be your own publicist. Mm-hmm. And so you get this whole list of all of these phenomenal events where ArbitralWomen members are speaking at, in addition to events that ArbitralWomen is supporting, because it is very active in the diversity space and also active in supporting intersectional diversity, right? That's huge. In my role, I serve as co-chair of global events. So thinking about the different conversations around diversity and gender as we hop jurisdictions. And it's a really interesting path, because you have to switch your hats. You can't go in with the preconceived notions that you can pull it off a rack and it's the same conversation in any jurisdiction. It certainly is not. We need to be acutely aware of how gender diversity changes in conversation, access conversations are different depending on where you are and what access you may even have, right? So that's really intriguing to me, and is teaching me every day how to look at different jurisdictions and engage with people on the ground there, to their credit for the communities they're building. I also spearhead the cooperation initiatives. It goes in line nicely with being also at the helm of NYIAC, cooperation and collaboration. Where does it make sense for us to collaborate? How do we spotlight ArbitralWomen members, right? So most recently, as an example, there are many more women practicing in tech. The Silicon Valley Arbitration and Mediation Center in the United States, they're doing a great job about getting thought leadership out there about tech disputes. And so let's platform the women, So recently we ran a program, and it was about leading practitioners in the tech space. And we didn't have to identify it as women. All the women were on the panel. That's how you do it. That's exciting, right? To capture that kind of talent, to give it a stage, and then to talk substantively about issues, and then break people up into breakouts, to run them through a scenario, and to talk through what you do, right? Live as a practitioner, there was no advanced homework, of course. That's not very helpful to get delegates to show up. Finally, I also help to lead the toolkit training initiative. So ArbitralWomen announced a toolkit, a diversity training toolkit. And now in virtual, what we're trying to do is think about, what does it mean to create candor online in remote so that you can run these trainings. And much of the training is running through simulations and sharing your own experiences, breaking down unconscious bias. Sometimes, to sit in a room with somebody, it takes you until midday to be able to reach over and feel a connection where you feel comfortable enough to share a story, right? And creating that space online, it's tough, but it's not insurmountable. And so we're thinking through how to do it. We're talking to law firms who want to engage and do this D&I training within their firm and across their global offices as a means to build community. And the only way that works is if all levels in the hierarchy are at the table. So we're talking through constructively, what does that mean? We're talking through as well with arbitral institutions, because they're able to get all stakeholders to the table. How do we have these thoughtful conversations, bespoke and curated for the specific organization, firm, or entity, so that it's really a powerful training and dialogue, and it doesn't just stop after you complete day 1 or day 2 of the training, right? There are intermittent check-in points to make sure that the goals that were set at that moment are being activated on, and that there's thoughtful follow-up. But that takes a process outlined, and lots of phenomenal arbitral women leadership supporting it and giving their time for it pro bono. So another very exciting initiative that I'm really delighted to be a part of. And a lot of it requires creativity. How do you do it? But we're giving a long, hard think on different ways we do it.
Thank you, Rekha. And to follow up on that and the work you do on diversity, as you mentioned earlier, we know that you recently launched R.E.A.L, Racial Equality for Arbitration Lawyers, with Krina Baltag and Kabir Dougal. And we would like to know more about R.E.A.L and what led to its creation.
Yes, well, so let me start out. Let's get real, friends. Let's do it. Go to the R.E.A.L website to learn a lot more. And I really need here to applaud the steering committee. So we all got together and have been talking about this. It started in March of 2020. It came out of the landscape of conversations about race that we were having in the US. And that was often anchored to police brutality. But the fact that all of this was happening, right, in the world, and we weren't necessarily talking about it directly in our international law circles. We weren't talking about race in a way that was palpable. And often when race conversations were introduced, they were divisive. We ended up, feeling somebody had to take a side and then defend the other side. And, even to have to be reminded of civility when we're having these conversations, and we're disputes lawyers. We deal in disputes every single day. We disagree every day, and yet we do it with our diction and our panache and our smarts about us. And I think it just exemplifies when you talk about aspects of diversity, it is tough. Maybe out of this fear that if you meander into talking about race, for example, and you do it incorrectly, you'll get labeled a racist. And so how do we take away that stigma? Be able to open the door to talk about the tough things when it comes to race or intersectional diversity, starting with race, though, because we didn't see so many banners out there in the international arbitration space talking globally about race. So enter Racial Equality for Arbitration Lawyers, launched in January 2021, virtually on Martin Luther King Day Jr., thoughtful of that date because he was a leader, and he really brought race to the forefront in the United States. And so from there, we've been building. We have different tranches of engagement. To me, the most important at the end of the day is the members and the allies. However you self-identify, we all have a role to play in having a conversation. So it's not a soliloquy. We have a phenomenal steering committee. They sit all over the world, broadly defined diversity, each of them, intersectional diversity as well, where applicable, but imbued with that cultural definition of diversity and how they see the world. That's important, right? So you make sure you're representing all perspective, all hues in the tapestry of diversity. And then we have our ambassadors who go about, sharing that R.E.A.L exists. And I'm happy to say that because of R.E.A.L, even folks within the same firm have been able to reach out to each other using R.E.A.L as the banner to say, oh, I saw the promotion that you're part of the steering committee on R.E.A.L. And they reached out. They could have just done it within the same firm, right? But how great as R.E.A.L being a connection point for that. Amazing. And then we're building out an academic council. And then most important in the mix of all of this as well, our R.E.A.L partners, because you cannot do it alone. And also the goal is to not do it without appreciating all of the other scholarship and thought leadership happening in the space. We're going to do it together. We are stronger together, and we're going to figure it out. But where we begin is by mapping what the institutions have done. The arbitral institutions were in the spotlight for a long time. Stakeholders said, you figure it out, you move the needle on diversity. And in truth, many of them across the board have done it. They've started mapping, they've kept metrics, right? Yeah. And so why remake a wheel that exists with robustness? Let's pull the metrics across the different institutions. And let's figure it out then through all of that and the mapping of that. To have 80 R.E.A.L partners is hugely impactful, but what does it do? We need to do something with the data. A while back, we sat down with a leader of an arbitral institution and they asked, what is the goal of R.E.A.L? In the first instance, it goes back to this cadence call I keep saying, it's to build a community. You can't just start talking about race and intersectional diversity out of nowhere. You need foundational elements and comfort to be able to talk about it. And so we need to build that at the grassroots level, at the ground level, at the local and regional level before you get global. But we'll get there. And so what I wanted to say on this line is, if you're interested to talk about race and its role in international law, join us, help us learn from each other. And frankly, together we do it better in any case. So we hope that you find yourself at R.E.A.L with a role that you want, so we keep teaching each other.
Together we do it better. I couldn't agree with you more.
Congratulations on this initiative, and it's nice. Like, we like to say here that we like to keeping it real.
Yes.
And then we keep it real with R.E.A.L, so that's wonderful.
And you are certainly a busy lady. I don't know how you do it. You have so much energy and you're involved in so many great initiatives. I really admire that. So before actually joining NYIAC, you were director of ADR services for the New York commercial division of the AAICDR or AAAICDR. What is the most important lesson, would you say, you learned there?
I think it was how to hone in on my advocacy, right? Although at an arbitral institution, you're not in active practice, you're sort of practice adjacent. Institutions have such a special and important role. They help expand the roster, they give opportunity, they build initiatives, right? They adapt rules to show the evolution of the practice. And so that was the most interesting thing, to get to see all of those processes and to get a bird's eye view of it, being able to engage with the tribunal and the council and hear the conversations and the best practices that were happening live. And so to me, that's the most important lesson. Regardless of your role, you always have a way to be an advocate, to zero in on something, to see how it's built and to help in building. And I certainly took an active role. I was lucky enough when I was at the ICDR and at the AAA, I was lucky enough to work with phenomenal colleagues. You know, I sat on the diversity committee and the innovation committee. I got to visit with affinity groups and helping build out the New York commercial roster to understand how we could do it better. What are the different expertise we could expand on? meeting with young attorneys looking to get into ADR and talking to them at the initial stages. Well, if you want a career in ADR, not necessarily and specifically as an arbitrator, but to practice in this field, think about doing these things. This is how you get involved. That is also advocacy. And most importantly, an advocate gets the luxury to spotlight others, right? It's a position of power in some instances where you can share the microphone. And I absolutely love that. It brings people closer. It goes towards building that community because it's trust. And so I learned how to be a good advocate in my R.E.A.L ways because I started out in an institution first.
That's great. And I think that's really good that our viewers have a better idea about the work in institution.
Yeah.
And to follow up on ICDR, you were earlier in your career a case counsel for ICDR. Can you share one of the greatest lessons learned in the administration of cases while you were administering cases?
Sure. Well, you know, I'll take the snapshot here to say what I learned most was from my colleagues. We had a really international team of practitioners across jurisdictions speaking multiple languages. And so the lessons were to keep your eyes and ears open, to be responsive, because I was learning constantly from my colleagues, and the law is imbued with the lives that we are arbitrating, right? These cases, they're business disputes more often than not. And so all of those personalities and hues come into it. Being able to appreciate those and why certain cases go certain ways, that becomes important. The other thing I think I really got reminded of time and time again, always ask the other side for comments. Even if it seems like a joint submission at times, always ask the other side. Always making sure both sides have offered their comments, just so that you can have that security. And it sounds so funny, but time and time again, you know, you would collect the documents and confirm receipt and go through the process. And then you would think, wait, did everyone respond? If there are multiple parties, multi-party, multi-jurisdiction, multi-everything, have I collected everything so that I can actually review a complete record with the tribunal? So always ask every side.
Great advice, absolutely.
So I think we're just about out of time for our show today, but we certainly have to thank you for giving us the opportunity to get to know you better, learn from you. I love the energy, but can't let you go unless you tell us one very important detail. We need to know, what team are you on? Is it How to Get Away with Murder, or give me
or what?
The Good Wife?
Well, I haven't seen How to Get Away with Murder, and I have seen Good Wife, so Good Wife it is.
Okay, what have you seen then?
I don't now I'm just going to embarrass myself here. I have been watching a lot of Atypical. Great show. It is focused in on a kid who's in high school and then transitions to college, and just the issues of a high schooler, and fascinating, because I think those issues, the social ways we deal with those issues as adults, it's not like we figured it all out, right? That and The Beauty and the Butcher, which I recently heard it is on Netflix. The Baker and the Butcher. The Baker and the Beauty.
I just started that. Baker and the Beauty.
I just mangled it. Oh my God. Now I'm like, wait, what did I say? Yeah, so that. And then I recently heard that apparently the same show is also done. It's an Israeli show as well. And I don't know which one is the original. Somebody asked me that and I said, I don't.
The Israeli one, I think, is the original.
It makes good sense, right? The adaptation comes in its Americanized form. But notwithstanding, I am very much enjoying that, and hope to, after I finish it, watch the Israeli version and see.
Compared how it.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll see. Well, if only I spoke the language, then I could also make an attestation towards, the translation accuracy, which is always I do that in my native language in Doumal. Whenever I watch and I see the translation, I'm always like, oh, that's not it, but that word is very difficult to translate. But in any case.
It's very true. And I think, we always look at translation because we're used to on our day-to-day.
Yeah.
It's tough work, but it's much easier to be the critic, right? I mean,
definitely. Well, thank you so much, Rekha. It was so great to have you with us today. And thank you for all those great lessons you shared and advice and everything you said about all the initiatives you're a part of.
What a pleasure. Your dynamicism together, as well as your invitation, it has really made my heart warm. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rekha. We'll see you soon.
Hey, see you soon. Bye.
So that was certainly very cool to hear from someone from another arbitral institution. For more Arbitration Life,
please be sure to hit the subscribe button and to follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and also Twitter and LinkedIn at Arbitration Life.